Hi, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So today I wanted to talk about one of those things that I think most of us struggle with, like what's my path? What should I be doing? What's my purpose? Who am I? There are a lot of different ways to sort of talk about the subject. And when you choose a magical path, things get even a little bit more complicated because so let's start off with first off, you don't have to have a defined purpose. There doesn't have to be some kind of a greater good that you are here to promote, fulfill. Um, there's not a sacred duty that you've been put here to accomplish, and you have to figure out what that duty happens to be. Not that's the wrong question for actually getting the most out of it. So, when I was doing a lot of channeling, that was a question that came up for a lot of people. And one of the things that Moira said that I thought was so succinct and perfect was life is its own reason for being. There doesn't have to be anything else. It exists to exist, and your life exists for you to experience it. That's the reason for being here, is to experience what's going on and to immerse ourselves in this particular experience of reality and the physical world and everything else that goes along with it. So it's easier to say not to worry about that than it is to do that, because a lot of people still have a hard time trying to figure out, like, who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? What do I want to do? And the reason that that becomes a complicated question with a complicated answer is because once we are born into this world and start to experience reality from a specific lens, it depends upon the family we're born into, the culture we're born into, um, the wealth or non-wealth that we're born into, um, the religion that we're born into, the specific time in history that we're born into, you know, um, our place in society, of society's perception of what our worth is, which is going to be different than what I'm talking about. So if we look at this first from um, like our society in the United States, North America, Canada, most of this part of the world at any rate, we often perceive value based upon criteria like where is your position in a company? Oh, do you have a job? Would be the first part. You'd have to have a job. Um, do you have a house? Do you have money? Do you have a car? Can you wear nice clothes? Um, what is your position in a company? If you're in a company, what's the hierarchy of the company? How high up the hierarchy are you? And how many friends do you have? Do they envy what you have? Do they want what you have? Which apparently is a sign that you have succeeded at something if other people want to have what you've got, at least, in a general sense. Um, so those things seem somewhat more obvious, to me at any rate, that they're artificial representations of the idea of value and worth. And there are things that you can't take with you. Um, Once you're dead, it doesn't matter because you're just as dead as anyone else on the planet who's dead. It's like the great equalizer of all things is death. And your accomplishments may last or may vanish. It's like, so in trying to come to a place of acceptance of what exactly is like my path and my worth. One of the reasons why I talk about my relationship with the universe versus my relationship with people or my status as a human versus other humans is because I'm shying away from those particular types of things. It's not, I don't consider them important in the longer scheme of experience in life. So that doesn't mean I'm against people having them. I am trying to own a house because it gives me a sense of security, and I feel safer that I'm a little bit in charge of my little piece or whatever, and may not just suddenly end up on the street without a moment's notice. So it gives me a sense of security. False perhaps, but still a sense of security. So, it's not that any of these things are intrinsically bad. It's just the weight of importance that we put on them that becomes the problem when you're trying to walk a magical path. So when you're trying to figure out what kind of a pagan you are, what kind of a witch you are, what kind of a magical person you are, what is the right path for you to follow, and the decisions that you're going to make. It's an experimentation. And one of the things to remember is that it's okay to make mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you don't learn anything. If you were always perfect, why would you need to be here in the first place? So making mistakes as you're going along is part of the process, and getting to that point where it's okay to accept making mistakes and learning from them, and maybe in some cases addressing those mistakes to kind of let other people know you understand that you made a mistake. This doesn't mean that you suddenly aren't valuable and you're not doing a good job. It just means that you're human, and being human is sort of the point of this. And then, when you first start out, you're like, you might be interested in one part of magic as opposed to another. So you might be one of those people that delves headfirst into divination or tarot or scrying or the pendulum, or you might be more interested in doing ritual or talking to spirits or interacting with the deities or not. I mean, there's like so many different flavors of stuff out there. But whatever you're interested in is a good place to start. That doesn't mean that's where you're going to land. That is sort of like an entry. It's kind of like there's this big ball of all this amazing stuff that you could potentially do, and no one can do all of it. So you have to fine tune what you can do and what you're interested in, and it's those interests and curiosities that start to draw you towards the center of that big ball of potential to then define your own particular path and what it is that you want to do with your life. So one of the things to remember, especially when you're doing this, is that it's okay not to know all the answers. I don't know all the answers, and I know that I don't know all the answers. And I'm okay with being ignorant of certain things. I don't have to be all things to all people, and because that would make it difficult for me to move through the world at all. I mean, it would be cumbersome mentally, at least, if not otherwise. So not knowing all the answers doesn't mean that you don't have a vivid imagination or an avid curiosity, and that you don't want to know more about certain things. I mean, you may find yourself starting off, like I said, with maybe, like tarot or something like that, and ending up in a completely different part of the magical path, and then decide that's where you want to be. So, and then you might be there for like 20 or 30 years and then decide to go in a slightly different direction or a completely different direction and explore another aspect of it and be there for a while. So accepting what you're interested in, being okay with being interested in different things. You have to narrow down because it's difficult to look at more than one thing at a time. And there's no wrong choices. That's the thing. It's like there's no way that you can make a wrong decision about what you want to learn because it's a big, huge, giant ball. And any one thing can lead you straight to the center or lead you around the outside of the ball and then another circuitous route and then back, in, or close to another thread that you go, ooh, look at that, and then going in that way, So there's no wrong way to start. There's no wrong subject to begin when it comes to exploring your nature and your relationship with the universe and with magic in general, and your particular path and flavor of path in particular. So, so when we're thinking about this kind of thing, I was thinking about, like with me, for example, which is the subject I know the most about, right? Most of us don't know much about ourselves anyway, so the most we know is going to be about ourselves. And I've always had an artistic leaning. I mean, I've always gravitated towards texture, color, fabric. When I was little with my dolls, apparently I was really into Greek style clothing with my dolls. My mother had this collection of colorful silk handkerchiefs, and I probably ruined a whole bunch of them by pinning them on my dolls' heads, because you could stick pins through that rubbery stuff, and dressing them up, and togas, and so Roman Greek kind of stuff was always there, which probably is influenced partially by my introduction to Aphrodite and Greek mythology when I was in the 4th grade. So fabric, the way things move, the color that they have, and so forth, how they drape, has always been an interest. I have been a costumer for many years, but only because I couldn't find costumes that I wanted that someone else had already made. I had to make them for myself. I was a belly dancer, so when I got into belly dancing, that kind of all came together with sewing and that kind of thing to make my outfits and costumes, and I did a pretty good job. I've had some fantastic outfits that I've made out of all sorts of different fabrics and whatnot for my belly dancing career. And I enjoy the process of creating something from nothing, from a group of things that aren't necessarily connected to each other. Taking coins and fringe and silk and, all this other stuff and putting it together into a form and a shape and whatnot. And I considered, dance, before I became a belly dancer even, dance a very sacred art, since one of the lives that I remembered extremely vividly was as an aura dancer. I danced with color. It was, auras, energy, not fabric, but, I needed fabric to be able to try and express that in a physical way. And so, going with the things that I liked and the things I was interested in led me to doing aura dancing and then becoming a belly dancer and learning a little bit about belly dancing history and so forth, and taking classes and just going through all of that and performing. And I got a lot out of it. I thoroughly enjoyed the movement, the spirituality of it, the tradition of it, with in the tradition that I was educated in, it was all about childbirth and preparing the body for having children and so forth. It was a woman's dance performed by women for women. And I once was able to perform a belly dance for a pregnant woman who was close to giving birth. I think she gave birth like a week to 10 days after my performance. And that was I was very excited about that, the sacred nature of the dance in association with creation and the pregnancy and the infant dancing in her womb, apparently, to the music and so forth. And, so that drew me into a whole direction of that. And, I'm not doing that actively now because I've aged, and although I can still belly dance, it's not something that is all that, well, it's a lot of exercise. Let's put it that way. So, the first thing that interested me was the tarot when I was in high school, and I got interested in the symbolism and the imagery and all that stuff that was around there, and that drew me in. But when it comes to like art, like I said, I've always had a thing about color and fabric and that kind of thing, and I have a really fantastic imagination. I mean, I can see such vivid pictures of things. It's quite wonderful sometimes inside of my head. And then I would try to like put it on a piece of paper or put it in a drawing or a painting or something along that line, and it would just not satisfy me. I didn't give up on the whole notion, but I couldn't find something that worked for me for a long time until one day I saw an article about this woman who made this beaded necklace, and it was like a free form, which was always, generally speaking, my art at the time. It's like when I did stuff, I would like just, throw a bunch of things together randomly and they would all fit and it would turn out great. But I wouldn't have a plan. And this piece was like that. There was like no plan. She just threw some cabochons that she liked and glued them on this piece of fabric and then put beads around them and gave them a fringe and made a clasp, and well, voila, you could wear this. And so I liked the idea from my own past experience of, not having to plan things out. And then my decision to make my first collar for my mother changed everything. It's like you just never know for sure exactly what it is that's going to influence you. And so I called my mother up on the phone and I wanted to make her a collar. And she was a harpist. She still is, but she's not performing at this point. She's a Celtic harpist. And so I thought it'd be nice to make her something she could wear when she was performing. And she suggested that I make a Celtic swan knot. I was going to make just a plain knot. I was going to not do anything fancy. And so her suggestion that I make a swan knot led me down a path of trying to find all these different Celtic knots, and there were no swans, not as knots that I could find. And I searched libraries, looked at books. She mentioned the Book of Kells, and I'm like, yeah, there are no swans in the Book of Kells that I could find. And I finally got a book that had I think a stork of some kind, or pelican almost kind of knot, but it was a bird at any rate. And then I modified the neck and the beak to turn it into a swan, which was actually pretty easy. But then I had to plan it like completely. I had to draw it. I had to fit it in. I had to trace it out. I had to do all these different. I had to learn all these different skills to do this one thing, and then a whole process of learning about beads and color and what the names mean, whether they are silver lined or whether they're solid lined or whether they're transparent or translucent, or I mean, it's like a whole bunch of stuff went in to the beginning of learning how to do that. and but the very first collar, I was like astonished at the result because it exceeded my imagination, which was like a remarkable thing for me to find, something that exceeded my imagination. And so, wow, I found my art. And it's like you never know exactly how or when that's going to hit. You just keep on exploring things and, doing stuff. It's not like I don't do other types of art, like with my wands and, it goes in there. But this is like my definite art form, is beading pictures of things that I like. Like and so once I did my mother's, then it was like I needed to do everyone else's in the family. So I did my sister and then my other sister, and then I decided I needed to do something for my son. So I made a picture for him because he's not going to wear a collar. And then I made a collar for his wife, so she would have one, and made one for my daughter, for my granddaughter. It just sort of evolved into this, and then I started making things for myself, for my magic, and I'm still in the process of working on that. I've gotten 2 pieces done. Water is the peacock, and then the tree for the earth, which I'm now getting ready to mount. That one took like 4 years of solid beading in order to get to, and I've just begun the griffin for air. Um, so, it's like these are things that will still be here when I'm gone. They'll last past my lifetime. Other people can touch them and see them and, enjoy them and so forth. And so that satisfies this part of me that wants to have some kind of a footprint for when I'm not here anymore, which is actually not uncommon among people. We want to leave a trace of us behind. But in the meantime, I'm having a ball doing them, and I'm always amazed at how they look. So when I talk about my relationship with the universe and what that means to me, it's like when you're trying to decide if the life you're leading is worthwhile, uh, depending on the criteria you're using, like we talked about with societal criteria or approval from groups of people and that kind of thing, that has not worked for me. It never did work for me because of being so different. So I kind of was forced to try and figure out better criteria for me to judge myself by, because other people were like in such a different space. I didn't feel like they really knew what I was talking about anyway. So, when I had that epiphany about not being able to escape from myself, having to live with myself for all time, that became a pretty good mirror for me to use to decide what I wanted to do. Like, if I do this thing and then suddenly I'm not here anymore, but I have to relive this thing and this way of being over and over again, is this something I would want to experience for like ever? And that helps me hopefully make better decisions. But when you're younger, it's harder to get to that state because the way society is generally set up, it judges us by our performance, our ability, our looks, our dress, our perceived value to one part of society or another. That certain people have more value than other people because we value the job that they can do more than other jobs or whatever, and it can be difficult to get to a place where you can see all of that and realize it really doesn't matter. The number of people that might like a post you have doesn't matter. Whether people like how you dress or not doesn't matter. Whether they like your decisions or not doesn't matter. It's how you feel about it that counts. And but it's easier said than done, like everything else, which is one of the reasons for putting out these videos, is to talk about this subject and to think about it. And finding even 1 or 2 other people that are of like mind that value you for who you are instead of for who you might be for them, or what you might do for them, or accomplish for them, is a wondrous thing. Finding those individuals, and it really only takes one. If you can find one person who just likes you for who you are and is okay with making mistakes and you making mistakes and realizes none of us are perfect and it's okay not to be perfect because this is a process, and likes your core personality, like who you are, your nature of who you are, then you have found something more valuable than any of the other things put together in the world. Having a powerful position and being an authority figure for people is not necessarily any indication of your value or your worth. It's we talked about power over, power with kind of structure of society. There's a whole video on that. and these are artificial um, landmarks and benchmarks that society has used to determine. I mean, the things that just happened this week, for example, like the Norwegian women's handball team not wanting to wear bikinis to do their athletic skill and play at the Olympics for their country, and choosing instead to wear shorts and a top like the men. And the huge furor from the powers that be who were in charge, they were like, you can't do that because we said this is what you have to wear, um, was quite telling, because the only reason to force women to wear something like that is not for them to be able to do their sport better, it's for men to be able to ogle them. And it sort of says it all, right there. And, the whole concept of the Olympics and, having the best in your country and countries competing with each other, another weird thing. When Simone Biles decided to step down and not compete for her physical and mental health, there was this huge reaction from people like, is it because you're injured that you can't do this? If it's just because you don't feel like it, then, just buck up and do it anyway because you're doing it for us. And the fact that people out there seem to think that that's an okay way of thinking about another person, that they project all this onto someone else and make them carry the weight of their projection to fulfill their fantasy or their desire to win at something they can't do. I just find the whole thing weird. So I'm very proud of both of these, both the women's team and for Simone for standing up for herself, because injuring yourself for this kind of a thing and then not being able to do it for the rest of your life because you went too far and you didn't listen to your body seems like a bad idea. Of course, I'm not one of those people that's into sports much, so I may not be a good good judge of what's supposed to be right or not, I suppose. But, living for others and not at all for yourself seems like a wrong thing, regardless of what your role in society happens to be, whether it's a really good player at some kind of a specific sport or team or something like that, or being a brilliant scientist or whatever. It's like, if it's only okay to be yourself if everyone accepts what you're doing as being okay because it pleases them, then that's an artificial construct that is not what we're talking about. So this is part of the shadow work kind of stuff. I mean, if you don't know who you are, you don't know what you feel. You can't make choices about your magic and your path that are going to satisfy you. You're always going to be looking for something else, because instead of having it be a natural outgrowth of your inner nature and allowing you to become more of who you already are and explore more of what you already have, then it's an artificial thing and you're trying to fit yourself into it. So you have like an idea out here. There's this role person, person I saw doing this kind of thing. I'd like to be like them, or I think what they did is like the thing I should be doing. And then you start trying to force yourself into that mold. If it isn't you, then you're going to be unsatisfied and unhappy. Somebody was telling me this morning actually about someone she knew, a friend of hers, whose father was, I guess, had been a really good basketball player when he was younger, and he blew out both of his knees. And when his son was born, the very first thing, as soon as he could walk, the father put a basketball in the son's hands and then started getting him to play. And this, of course, is one of those examples of living through someone else vicariously, something you loved and wanted to do but couldn't do. Instead of moving on and finding something else you're passionate about, you like have this sense of loss and unfulfilled, it's like you never fulfilled your purpose because this is what you were meant to be and meant to do. And so he forced his son to do the same thing. And the same thing happened to his son. He blew out his knees. and then couldn't play anymore. And then he was in a lot of pain, and then he got addicted to painkillers, and then he ended up going down a pretty negative pathway with the addiction, and he's been fighting the addiction ever since. So, if he had a different parent, if he had a parent that was encouraging him to find what he loved, maybe basketball would have been it, but maybe not. Maybe it would have been something else. And if it had been something else, if he was a good parent, he would have encouraged his child to explore that something else that filled them with joy, or that, that they really wanted to do. That was something they were fascinated by or drawn to or whatever. So we ignore those kinds of things at our peril, because if we ignore those moments when, we have a flash of intuition or a sudden interest in something and don't follow through with it, one, we're never going to know if it really was the thing that would have fulfilled us, or, given our life purpose or our sense of meaning, or at least having a lot of fun for a period of time. And then we won't have had that option to explore that and then to come to our own conclusion whether it was really the right thing or not, or if it was just sort of, a passing fancy that was just sort of interesting now, but I got into it more and it just sort of lost its glow, and I thought it was going to be something else. Because we do that a lot. We project our idea of what something's going to be onto it before we ever get there. That happens a lot with magic, obviously, because of all the TV shows and stuff out there, and we get fed these images and stories and everything else about what it's going to be like, and then when we get to the reality and it's different than that, it can leave this sort of gap, I guess, between our idea of it and the reality of it. So the better we can get rid of the idea of it, the more likely we are to get to the reality of it, right? That makes sense. So, of course, the answer to the question, what is my path and what is my purpose, is nobody knows, including you. There is no actual answer to that question. You don't have to have, like I said at the beginning, a purpose that is the thing that you're supposed to do. And it certainly motivates people to do all kinds of stuff, like when they survive a disaster and they're looking for a reason why they're not dead and everyone else is. Finding a holy purpose or greater purpose or what have you is one of the things that people often latch on to in order to make it acceptable in their own mind that they're not dead with everyone else. And if they don't have like a higher purpose or a holier purpose or whatever, why did they survive and everyone else didn't? And the thing is, it was probably chance. I mean, luck, or it's just the way it happened, and it may have nothing to do with who they are or what they might do and accomplish in society. That doesn't mean you can't turn tragedy into a motivation, and certainly we see that happen a lot. In fact, social change is one of the things that is often propelled by tragedy, human tragedy. And the people that experience it directly and understand it completely and what that really means are the ones that have the energy to go out and try and change it in order to keep other people from having to experience it. So, everything is complicated. There's just no straightforward answer to anything at all. And I love the journey. I mean, I decided to put these videos out there so that other people could see my perspective on things, and if it had value, that would be great. But my sense of worth isn't determined by whether or not I have followers or whether people like what I have to say. I find it gratifying if what I say touches someone else and helps them along, but it isn't bound up in that, because I don't have a lack of self-worth that I'm trying to fill, like a hole inside of me that I'm trying to fill with others. I'm just sharing who I am. And of course, I've got Ian, so that makes everything fine. So yeah, life is never straightforward or simple, and it is like a thing, but it's like, the exploration of all those different threads and finding the thread that you like the most, or that you like right now better than other threads. It's like, you can do kitchen witchery for a while, you can do hedge witchery for a while, you can study astrology and decide whether that's your thing or not, you can do cards, you can, you know, commune with the gods and the goddesses. There's like huge amount of variety when it comes to this kind of thing. And for me, as far as my own personal magical path, it's always been, what do I need right now? It's like, do I need to know how to do this? Yes, I need to know how to do this right now. And like, okay, I now know how to do this. Will I ever do this again? Maybe not, because I may never need to do this again. Kind of like when I helped the police find the dead body. I'm hoping never to do that again. I'm not fond of that one at all. It was like very strange for me, but I did it because apparently I was supposed to, and it needed to be done, and I agreed to go and look and see what happened, and voila, there she was. So, but I'm not seeking like the police and calling them up on the phone and saying, I think I know who did it, or, where they are, or anything like that. That's not who I am. I'm not interested in that. But it needed to happen, and I needed to be able to do it even though I didn't know I could. It's just one of those strange things. So I think that's an after effect of living in the moment and being in the life that I'm in instead of trying to be in any of the other lives that I remember bits and pieces of. This is the life right now that's important, and this is the feedback to pay attention to and to be with and in and so forth. So, and learning from the things that have happened to me, learning how to avoid them in the future because I can see the writing on the wall or the indicators that this is where this is going, and stop it right at the beginning and turn around and go back the other way because, like, no, I've been down this path before and this is a bad idea. I'm not doing that again. So if you can learn from your mistakes, that's a good thing. If you can't learn from your mistakes, then there wasn't much point in making them, right? Anyway, hopefully you'll find some of this rambling I'm doing useful this week, because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about, and it was like a weird week for all sorts of things, and nothing just sort of popped out and said, this is the subject. So this is what I ended up with. I'll let you decide whether it was worth your while or not. So this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.